Hi there, my name is David Brayley. I'm an author. I write stories about sport largely for young people. And today I'm delighted to be speaking on behalf of Neath and Port Talbot Libraries, where I'm going to talk to you about how I get inspired, and certainly when I was starting my journey as a writer, how I get inspired basically to write some of my stories using a very, very simple technique. And that technique really is using images, using photographs to inspire me to write about a location or an act or a moment that's taking place at a certain location. Now, if you think about sport, then sport usually takes place on a sporting field, on a court, in an arena. And I found that when I was starting out as a writer, and maybe I didn't want to on a certain day write a long story about something, but I wanted to practice writing, then often I would use images of sport and sporting moments just to get me to write. It might be a small story, a short story. It might be a descriptive story, using the details I was seeing in the image to really inspire me to write the most descriptive way that I possibly could. So there's lots and lots of different ways that you can use a photograph and an image to inspire you to write. And as I said, you can either write about the location, you can write about what's happening in front of your eyes in the photograph. I found it was a really easy way just to help me start writing at the start of my writing journey. So we're going to be talking about locations and using photographs as an inspiration. Now, when I go into schools and deliver talks in schools, and we get to the point where young people are going to start the exercise to begin their story, the most popular thing that I get back from young people is, I don't know what to write about. I don't really have any ideas. I'm not sure what story I can tell. Now, I always come back to the issue about writing about what you know, what you love, things that you're aware of. In time, you can write stories about lots of other different things and talk about situations and storylines that you have to go away and research. But I often find that the easiest way to start a story is to write about things that you know. So for me, when I was in school, my favourite thing above everything else was sport. And I'm fortunate that I've been able to write books about sport based on my love of sport. Now, in a funny way, these books became quite easy to me to write, because they were focusing on things that I'd done all my life. I played rugby, I played football, I played golf and cricket, being a cyclist. So I would just focus in on things that I loved, and that helps then with the story writing, because the idea is at the front of your mind. But often I would still be exactly the same as some of the pupils that I meet in schools, where I wouldn't really know what to write about today. What am I going to write about? What's my story going to be about? And that's when I came up with the idea of using photographs to inspire me. Now, I'm going to talk to you today about sports photographs that have inspired me, and a certain image that I'm going to share with you that maybe you could use as well. But this could be anything. If you're really into, let's say, space and science, then why not look at images about the planets, about space travel, things that can really get you going, get those creative juices in your mind flowing, and then you can start thinking about what you're going to write about, plan your story, and describe that location or a character at a key location. Now, the beauty of using a photograph is that you can pretty much say what you see. Okay, whatever you're seeing in that photograph, why not start there and just describe that? Okay, so there's lots of possibilities. As I say, it helps me with my descriptive writing now. And I never used to try and start out to write a long, detailed story if I used a photograph or an image as the inspiration. I would just try and write about that image descriptively, and then maybe look at the characters if there are people in the image, and just look at it from their perspective. What are they to do with this photograph? What are the jobs that they're carrying out, perhaps? And how can I develop that character as well? So let's show you this image that I'm going to talk about today. Now, it's a bit difficult for me to get it to you without cutting off the feed of me being filmed doing this. So I'll just hold it up there with this iPad, and hopefully it's good enough for you to be able to see what we're talking about. So this is an image taken at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff. It's Wales playing against Ireland. And what I love about this photograph, and the reason that I would love to use this as just a little exercise for me to write something about it, is that it's pinpointing one key moment of this sporting match. Now, you probably know that a rugby match lasts 80 minutes, so a lot goes on in that 80 minutes. And if we were writing a story about the whole rugby match, then it would be a pretty long story, at least 80 minutes long with everything that would have happened in the game. But I like to focus on what I call a closed moment of sport, a moment where everything stops and then it just restarts. And this is a restart in rugby that's called a line-out. So we can see just off the field, actually, with the gentleman holding up the flag. He's the touch judge or the linesman, and he is in charge of making sure that the person just in front of him, the gentleman with the big sort of long ginger beard and the red shirt, he's playing for Wales. He's the hooker, and he's just thrown the ball into the line-out. And we can see then there's two gentlemen really, really high up in the air. So that is Alun Wyn Jones for Wales, and they're competing for the ball that's been thrown in by the Welsh hooker. With his back to us, I mean, number 11 is the Welsh player who is hoping that Alun Wyn Jones is going to win that ball and tap it back to him, or catch it and throw it back to him so Wales can attack. But also you can see the Irish player, eyes on the ball, focusing on hopefully his player getting the ball, winning it and giving it back to him. And that's when the action then would begin for the next part of the game. So I'm going to just hold this up for another few seconds for you to really take in this image. I want you to look at everything in the image. I want you to think about everything in the image, from the people taking part in the game, as I said, the linesman, but also importantly, the people in the crowd. And if you look at the people on the pitch and the linesman, everyone is focused on one thing. They're focused on that ball. And that is the moment that we really want to capture in our story. The ball, what's going to happen, what has happened, what's about to happen. So there's our image. Now, as I said, that image gives me as a writer lots and lots of possibilities, lots of ideas about what I can write about. Descriptively, I can write about everything I just saw. I can write about the way or the height that Alun Wyn Jones is in that line-out, how tall or high he is off the ground. I can write about the thoughts of the players. I can write about what the linesman is focusing on. I'd consider describing the kits, the colours of the kits, and everything else, just to describe the difference between playing for Wales and playing for Ireland. But what I really find interesting when I look at pictures like that is I try and imagine what's going on in the minds of the people in the photograph. So if I put this up again, I like to focus on the people. So what's in the mind of the linesman? He's only there to make sure that there's no foul play. Now you can see the Welsh player standing at the back is pushing Alun Wyn Jones up high in the sky. Now he's not allowed to touch the Irish player in the green. That ball has to be thrown straight. So there's a lot of pressure on the linesman. He's going to make sure that everything is done legally. So he will have a certain outlook on this moment. Then we look at the hooker, the guy that's just thrown it in. He's probably a bit desperate. He's probably anxious and desperate that he's thrown the perfect ball. If he throws it too high, then Alun Wyn Jones misses the ball. If he throws it too low, then maybe it'll just cannon off one of the players and it might go onto the Irish side. If he doesn't throw it at the right speed, the right trajectory, if he doesn't throw it straight, then the ball gets given straight to Ireland for them to have a go. So he's under a lot of pressure. Then the Welsh players in support of Alun Wyn Jones, they're doing everything that they can to make sure they help him get that ball. What's Alun Wyn Jones thinking? Is he just calm, cool as a cucumber? He's done this 1,000 times before. Or is he in a desperate battle to make sure that he wins the ball? Because we don't know yet at what point this is happening. This may be the first minute of the game. Maybe it's the last minute. Maybe Wales are losing by a point and they need Alun Wyn to win this ball so that Wales can take a drop goal and potentially win the game. If that's the case, then the Irish players are going to be desperate themselves to get the ball back. And what about the fans? What are they thinking? Are they silent, expecting and worrying about what's going to happen? Are they roaring, really getting behind their team to encourage them to win the ball and then win the game? So there's lots and lots of ideas just in that one simple photograph to think about and write about the individual thoughts of what's going through the mind of the players on the pitch, the different points of view, the different pressure points that they're all feeling. So that's something that I would focus on. Who are the key people in this image that I can write about? As I mentioned, descriptively, then I'd be looking at writing about the kit. You may have seen in the photograph, some players had their socks up, some players had their socks down. It may not be important to you as a reader to know whether their socks are up or down, but that's the type of detail that I like to throw in to my stories, just to give a little bit of colour and a little bit more of a feel to what's going on. It doesn't impact on the story at all, and you certainly wouldn't go and write about the 6 or 7 players in that picture and describe every one of them, did they have their socks up or down. But certainly it wouldn't harm if you just described one of them stood there anticipating, socks around their ankles, just something like that. It just helps with a bit of depth for the story. As I said, I started writing by using images like this just to inspire me and to get me describing locations. So obviously I could talk about the crowd, I could talk about the stadium, I could talk about the pitch. Is it a muddy pitch? Is it a perfect pitch with the grass, the beautiful green grass is cut perfectly and is in fantastic condition? All of these things I can pick up just from that one photograph. As I said, I wouldn't use this photograph to write a long, detailed story. I'm just using it to practice my craft, really. Just get into the habit of writing with description, with thought about people, and then maybe just weaving it into a short story of some description about how the game was won or lost. As I said, you can pick any image. This one is just one that I picked on rugby. There are so many images on the internet about sport, about anything that you might be into that can inspire your interest. Now, one tip I would give you, and again, it's quite an easy thing. I'm sure you guys have already been told about this, but it's writing with imagery or using imagery to help your descriptive writing about a location or a moment in sport, as this photograph is. Now, imagery is quite straightforward. It's just using the 5 senses that we possess as human beings to sort of help us with our writing. So we're looking at sight, sound, taste, touch and smell. Now the danger with writing with imagery, when we list those 5 senses and use those then as our key for writing, is that we feel we have to use them all in this passage of writing. We have to write about the sight, things we see. We have to write about the sound, what we might be hearing if we were in the stadium. We have to write about the taste. But then it's a bit difficult really to write about taste in the middle of a rugby match, isn't it? You could write about it if you're sitting in the crowd. So it could be that your story has got nothing to do with any of the individual players. Maybe you want to use this image to inspire you to write a story from the point of view of somebody sitting in the crowd. If you've ever been to watch Wales at a rugby match, it's really exciting to be there. And the nice thing about being there is that there's lots of stuff you can buy to eat. So it may be that in your story, you've just bitten into, I don't know, a really hot sausage roll or a pasty or whatever it might be. And maybe you want to describe taste in that manner. But we'd struggle to put taste in relating to the rugby that's going on. So maybe you wouldn't want to include that in your story if you're writing about just the rugby that's taking place. Then we've got touch. Obviously, we can see in the photograph Alun Wyn Jones was rising high to touch the ball with his hand, so we could describe that sensation of the ball brushing off his fingertips, for example, the leather little dimples that appear on a rugby ball, how that sensation would have transferred through his fingertips. And then finally, the smell. Again, in rugby, the smell, the overriding smell, would often be one of liniment that players would rub into their legs prior to going out to the game. But personally, I'm not sure if I would focus on that if I was writing about the action on the pitch. But maybe I'd focus on it if I was sitting in the stand. Perhaps someone next to me had just bought a really hot steaming cup of coffee, and the smell of the coffee beans was floating in front of my nostrils, giving me a wonderful aroma of coffee. It's up to you. But if we focus on those senses and imagery when we're writing, then we can really bring out the detail in that photograph. So if we're focusing on the sight, let's say, that's where we'd be looking at the colours potentially of this wonderful photograph. The different colours between the two teams, the red of Wales, the green of Ireland. And we would want to be talking about the colours in a very descriptive way. You know, would we call it a ruby red? Would we call it an emerald green? I'll leave it up to you. There's lots of other colours in the background, the advertising hoardings. The fans would be wearing replica shirts and scarves and so on. It would be a hugely colourful scene. The colour of the grass, pristine emerald green grass. Now the sound, again, would be massive in this stadium. Sometimes, as I mentioned, it's quite interesting to write that there's no sound. Because if it's an important part of the game, the fact that everyone is quiet and nervous suggests that nobody knows the outcome. But the flip side of that is that we might want to write about the incredible, the volume, the screaming, the roars of the fans watching this incredible piece of rugby. And I mentioned about the touch. We've got players lifting other players. In rugby, we have collisions where people tackle each other. They're bound to feel the sensation of touch as they tackle on their shoulders, on their chests, and so on. So there is so much that we can use just from this one image that can help us when we choose to write with imagery. So, just to recap, using a photograph can be a wonderful starting point to develop your writing. And it can be a photograph of anything, as I said. I've chosen rugby today and a piece of action that's frozen in time. And from that, I can use my senses, my imagery, the colours that I'm experiencing, the noise that I'm hearing, all of these wonderful things that just leap out from this photograph. But it could be, if you're writing about, I don't know, say history, maybe it would be a photograph of a castle. Maybe a castle at darkness, just when the light is going. Maybe it's mysterious. Maybe that image will help you write a kind of ghost story or a historical story about things that have happened in the venue in the past. So using a photograph, just a one-off photograph, is a really, really good way just to encourage you to write, give you an idea about what you're writing. And as I said, you could just write about that one-off picture. You could literally just describe what you can see in that with all your colours, sounds, etc. that you want to imagine. Or you could use this as a basis to write the story of the rest of the match. What does happen? Does Alun Wyn Jones win the ball? Do Wales then get the ball? Do they go the length of the field to score a try in the corner to win the game against Ireland? Do Ireland actually get the ball and they launch an attack that maybe a Wales player has to make a tackle right on the try line to save the game and Wales win by 1 point in the last minute? It's totally up to you. And the wonderful thing about using photographs like this is that we don't really know what did happen. It's not like a video where you can watch it to the end and then you basically end up describing everything that you've seen. You are using this photograph to inspire you, to get you to add your idea on where the action led to. As I say, I used to use them a lot when I was practicing my writing. It would just help me formulate ideas, help me with description. And then I found that when I came to write my own books, including this one, which I've written with James Hook, which is about rugby, then it really helped me create stories, descriptive stories in here, a story about rugby, because I had so many memories in my mind of images of rugby matches exactly like the one I've been showing you today. So I hope that gives you some help and some ideas using an individual photograph to give you ideas to write about a location or a moment in time, a moment in sport, a moment in history, whatever it might be, and using imagery to tell that story, but never forgetting the people in the photograph. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are their hopes? What are their fears? I hope this all made sense to you. There's a lot for you to take in, but as I said, if you're ever stuck for an idea for a story, why not just have a look at some photographs and see if they can inspire you the way that they've always inspired me. Thanks so much for listening, and good luck with all your story writing.